You're about to listen to an episode that we recorded with Joe Gilbert. Joe is the founder and managing director of Red Giraffe, a full-service marketing agency. We had Joe on to talk about his new book, Basecamp to Boardroom, where he shares over 30 lessons that he has learned in the 9 years of running Red Giraffe. In this episode today, we focus on some of Joe's favorites, including the importance of knowing your destination before you get going, why it is so important to go at your own pace, and how, regardless of how difficult it is, sometimes the best thing to do is just walk away. We hope you enjoy the episode.
What's the most important lesson you've learnt in 9 years of mountaineering and business ownership?
I think the most important thing I've learned is just to not quit and keep going, both in business and on the mountain. So, the amount of times in business where I've just felt like packing it all in, throwing in the towel, and I just haven't, and I've just kept going. I've seen a lot of businesses go under in, other agencies in the 10 years we've been running, and we haven't. And the only thing we've done different is we just kept going. We didn't quit. That doesn't mean I'm better at running a business or we do anything great or different they didn't do. We just kept going and going and going. And it's exactly the same in mountaineering. Those that get to the summit and those that don't, they're probably not fitter or more skilled or have any better abilities. They just kept going and going and just refused to quit. And that's how they got there.
How close have you been to calling it a day?
So many times. There's so many times, I've gone and seen my business coach and I'm like, that's it. I'm throwing in the towel. I can't do this anymore. And, he's kind of reminded me, look, the shit hits the fan for everybody. Is how you deal with it that, is whether you are successful or whether you fail. So a lot of times I felt like quitting, but I haven't. And that's why we're still here. I think that's the only reason. Just didn't quit.
What keeps you going?
The fact that I'm now unemployable. I think it's really important to find your why. Why you do this, and I think I've always wanted a really good kind of like work-life balance, and what keeps me going is that flexibility, that ability to choose my hours, work when and where I want, even if that means working an 80-hour week, so I don't have to work a 40-hour week. But it means if it's a hot sunny day, I work in the garden. I don't have to answer everybody. The business does well enough that my wife can go part-time so we can enjoy that kind of flexible life together. And that's it really, that freedom, I think, to be your own boss.
Okay. So you have, we should hold this up to camera.
Yeah.
So Joe has written a book, Basecamp to Boardroom. And what we're going to do is you have, I think in here, 30 lessons that you've learned over the last 9 years of business ownership. And we're going to structure the rest of the questioning based on those lessons. Okay. So it's a test of recalling what you've put in the book and then hopefully interweaving with some of the more practical stories of how you've brought some of that into your business.
Yeah.
Okay.
So before we do that, what was the process like of writing a book?
It was good. It definitely started strong. So I said to myself, I'm going to write a chapter a day. It's going to take me about 45 minutes per chapter. And that started well, and then it kind of slipped a bit. But again, going back to consistency, the only reason it got finished is because I didn't give up and kept going. So it took a little bit longer than I wanted it to because life just got in the way. But writing it was very nice. It was very enjoyable for me to recall some of the stories and great memories I had in the mountains. Editing was painful. I didn't like that, but I did it. And it's finally here.
Nice.
So let's get into the first lesson then. So this is actually lesson number 1 in the book as well. So it's around knowing your destination.
Yeah.
Is that something that you knew straight away? And I guess the follow-up to that is like, what is your destination?
Right, in terms of business or?
You can answer that whichever way you want.
Okay. So when I first started the business, no, I had no idea. My destination was just to run a business, and that was it. And it's only as I've gone on that I've set goals and destinations in mind, where initially it was to make money each month, which wasn't there from the start. So to year one, it was like, can I progress from beans on toast? That'd be the destination. And then as we grew, I would have specific financial goals, like I want to hit this kind of turnover, this kind of profit. a great exercise I did with my coach was to create this vision board. So we literally had like an A2 bit of foam board, and I just sat down and spent a day on it saying, this is how I want my life to look. And it was nothing extravagant like a private jet or a yacht. It was things like, I want to own a house. I want to have a dog and the flexibility that means I can have a dog. I want my wife to be able to go part-time. I want to have a watch. That kind of stuff. So not big things, but enough where we're comfortable and, we're not struggling, we're not stressed. And that was the end goal. So it took maybe 5 years to get there. And then we did through the hard work and perseverance, and we got everything that was on the board, the dog, the house, the life. We built the life that we wanted. And it's the little things like, I don't have a Ferrari, but we have private medical. So something happens, I know my wife and I are covered. So that was the goal for me. And now that we've kind of done all those things, looking at big picture, we're saying we want to be, that was year 0 to 10. Next 10-year goal is we want to be established as one of the UK's leading digital agencies. So that's what the next chapter looks like. But I think it's really important to have a kind of goal and vision in mind. If you don't know where you're going, one, you don't know what to put into the sat nav, you're kind of just wandering around and hoping you'll get somewhere. But two, how can you ever know if you're successful or not if you don't know what success looks like and you never benchmarked it? So yeah, that's kind of the journey we're on now and where we're going.
Do you use the destination to kind of plot the journey, in essence, as a roadmap?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we say, what is the 10-year destination? Then we say, what do the next 3 years look like? And then we'll say, next 3 and 5 years. And then we say, what do the next 12 months look like to hit that 3-year goal? And then we break that down into 30-day plans, we say, and 90-day plans as well. So we say, what does this quarter look like? So we know we're on track to hit that 12-month goal. And then what are all the tasks I need to do over the next 30 days so we're on track for this quarter? So it's quite simple goal setting and breaking the big goals down into like smaller and smaller goals. But it's a good way of testing whether you're on track or not.
What? So when you talk about that vision board that you had,
yeah,
I totally agree with you. That when you first start out, all of those things seem like astronomically far away, right?
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, like some of them, to a lot of them, probably could have been achieved through like a more traditional route of employment and things like that. So, like, what is it within you that decided that actually the self-employment, the business building route was the one for you?
Good question. So I always grew up around business. My mum and dad both ran businesses. I've set up a few businesses in my time before this one, the main business. So some did well, some spectacularly failed. One of my favourite ones, I started a little business selling BB guns on eBay when I was about 15. Nice. It's amazing. I was buying them for £5 at the market, selling them on eBay at 25 quid. I thought I'd be a millionaire by the time I was 18 and retired. That went great for a month until eBay banned me and said, that's a replica firearm. You're not allowed to sell that on the site. And I was left with a cupboard full of BB guns that my mum didn't know about until she found out and hit the roof. But I kind of just loved that idea of, instead of having this kind of rat race and this career ladder that you have to climb, I was like, why not I just own the ladder rather than climbing someone else's? And then I did go down the employed route for a while, and I was employed. I was a marketing manager. And then my last job before I started this, my mental health was really taking a hit. I've always been happy. I've never struggled with mental health, but for the first time I felt I was really, I didn't know at the time, but I felt I was really struggling with depression when I was in there. So, it's that Sunday night dread, even Sunday morning dread, where you're like, my time is nearly up and then I'm back to prison tomorrow. I literally felt like I was on day release from prison. And, there was just no flexibility. We had a terrible boss who was just not understanding at all. And I hated it there. I hated it. And I didn't even work out my notice. I just got so sick of it. I just said, I'm done. Got up and walked out. Realised from that point that I could never be employed again. And I was like, right, it's my life now. I got to do it the way I want. Yeah. And yeah, that was the journey.
Yeah, that's a similar journey to me because we worked at a fantastic agency, one of the best, and they really did look after us. But in my mind, I never thought about starting my own business. It felt like too much work until you kept basically in my ear, come on, let's do it. Once I've done it, I can't think of myself ever going back into employment. The freedom that you get for working for yourself is just out of this world. So,
Yeah.
So let's move on to lesson number 5 in the book, which is probably like from a decision-making framework perspective. I love it. So I think the chapter is titled Use Your Brain.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Okay. So in mountaineering, you have to be able to make snap decisions, and you can't let emotion get in the way of making that decision, because you're literally talking life or death. And when that kind of fear and panic starts setting in, you make terrible decisions. You're literally using like the emotive part of your brain rather than the logical parts of your brain. And the emotive part of your brain is tiny compared to all that kind of logic part of your brain. So trying to make decisions under stress is just really poor. So I think the example I put in the book, we were trekking in the Swiss Alps, and we were about an hour away from our hut on something like a 7-hour trek. And we came to, I don't know how to describe it, like a bit of the mountain slope that we had to cross. I don't know the technical name. It should have been like a kind of rocky slope that would have been an easy crossing. But because there'd been a very heavy snowfall that winter, and it had been a cold winter as well, it was basically like a waterfall. It was just water pouring down it. And our options were either turn around and go back, but we knew there was a storm blowing in from behind us, so we would have very likely been caught on the exposed ridges out in the storm, which is the last thing you want in the mountains. Or we could have crossed the torrent, or we could have gone and tried to find a way around it. But of course, we had no idea what it looked like further up. It could have been worse. Could have, the crossing could have collapsed and been degraded. We just had no idea. And, we stood there for a minute. We're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get across this thing? I'm thinking, like, come on, we've got to think logically. How are we going to get across? Because you're sitting there panicking. You're thinking, we can't cross this. We're going to die. But we can't go back because we could die. We don't know if there's spaces at the hut we've just come from, so we could get there and say, no, we're full, and then we're kind of homeless for the night. So, things like that in the mountains where you need to be able to make logical and calculated decisions. And this decision-making model that I use, my business coach actually taught me. The anagram is BRAIN, which stands for what are the benefits of this decision? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? What does your gut instinct say? And what happens if we do nothing? So I was like, right, let's think logically. How are we going to get across this pass? So the benefits of crossing it mean that we'll be at our hut in an hour. We'll be in safety and shelter way before the storm hits. And we take away the unknowns. The risks are obviously we slip and die, which is catastrophic, but then we could also have those same risks doing the other options. The alternatives were both not great. Gut instinct says, okay, can we get across this? Well, if we do it one at a time, we rope up together, there's enough of us to anchor each other that we can kind of minimize that risk. And nothing was just not an option. You just can't stay there. We just couldn't. So we said, okay, we're going to cross it. We're going to do it. So I sent the tallest guy across first. So we all roped up together. And basically when you're in like a train like that, two of you can hold the third person's weight. So we sent the tallest guy across first. I said, you hop across. He hopped it, no problem. And then I went across because the third guy was the heaviest guy. So I said, I'll go across next because I've got their combined weight to hold me. I'm quite light. And I got across and it was fine. And then with me and the taller guy across, we were able to take the weight of the heaviest guy. And it was fine and we made it. But it's that kind of model when you apply it to decision making, which has been so helpful in the business as well. Things like when people have talked about partnering up with me? You know, like, why don't we come in and be business partners or something like that? And you think about it for a second and you think, yeah, this seems a really, really good idea. You know, this guy can come on board and I won't be lonely in business anymore and I'll have someone to share the burden with. And, you know, your emotive brain is going, this is going to be great. You know, you won't have to do this all on your own now. And then you run it through the process and you say, actually, I'm looking at giving away half of my business, like 50% of everything I've built, just so I don't feel lonely. I'm like, that's ridiculous. And yeah, using that kind of logic-based decision-making model has really stopped me from making a lot of bad decisions in business. But yeah, it's interesting when you apply that kind of thing when it's life or death. But in business, it's not life or death. So we often don't think logically. We let emotion cloud our judgment. But it's a great skill to learn, I think.
I'm just thinking like a tall person, a lighter person. It's like us three trying to get across.
Yeah.
George behind the camera. So George is what, for people listening, George, how tall are you?
6'4".
6'4". We send George over.
We send George over first. Who would go next?
You.
Me.
Yeah. Greatly.
Then you afterwards. I
Yeah.
can see that happening.
Yeah.
Because I would definitely slip and fall.
Yeah, I can see you
You guys
slipping.
would have to carry me.
So let's move on to lesson number 7. So the reason that I picked this out is 2 things. One, the story that you give here is, so I'm like terribly afraid of heights.
Yeah.
Like I love
Me too.
I love skiing, but I am like, I've cried in front of all my friends on a chairlift before. Like, I am terrified of heights. So the story that you give here is good, but it's also, I think, like Brendan and I hold like a monthly catch up where we look at the things that have gone well that month, the things that have gone bad, and like the thing that you tell me over and over again is like the chapter of this lesson, which is learning to let go.
Yeah.
So first of all, tell us the story that you use in the book as the analogy when you're on the mountains, and then tell us how for you that has moved into business ownership.
Okay, cool. So I'm terrible with heights, and being up high is fine, but it's that fear of falling, which everyone says, how can you be into mountaineering if you're terrified of heights? So as long as I'm on firm ground, it's okay. And it was a Mont Blanc skills training course in North Wales, and I'd done a lot of climbing in climbing centres and stuff, but nothing like this extreme. And it was classic Welsh weather, like raining, strong wind, cold, and we'd got about 3/4 of the way up. I don't even know where we were. It was in Snowdonia, in one of the faces of Snowdon, but I'd never seen that side of it before, and it was pure like vertical rock climbing, and I'd done fine to this point, you know, well out of my comfort zone, but I was pushing through it and it was okay. And then we got to this bit that was like on the corner, and I'd kind of made this quite impossible half leap, half stretch to get to this position that I was in, and I'm just hanging off this like precipice, and it's probably about an 800 meter sheer drop below me. There's nothing between me and the ground, and my guide is above me, so we're roped together, and he's looped the rope around the rock, so we're anchored and we're safe, and I'm harnessed up. But I was properly stuck. There was no handholds around me. I'm just clinging on for dear life. There's a handhold above me, but I can't reach it, and I can't go back to where I've come from because I've kind of jumped diagonally up, and there was no way I could have made that same jump back. And I just had this moment where I just completely froze and just shut down, and I was like, I can't do this. And the guide was saying, come on, you have to. I was like, I can't. And he's saying, you've got to let go. You can't stay here hanging off the cliff face forever. You just have to trust me. You have to make a leap of faith. He's like, you can do it. You can jump and you can grab it. And if you miss, it's fine. You're roped up. I've got you. And, you know, logically, I knew it was fine. But mentally, you know, I just panicked and I just couldn't. And I was there, I was like shaking, trembling. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just can't. And he's like, you got to do it. And I was like, I can't. And he got quite cross in the end. He's like, Joe, he's like, you just got to let go. He said, you just have to. You can't stay here. I was like, can't we call mountain rescue? He's like, don't be ridiculous. He's like, they're not coming. He's like, you've just got to do it. And I was like, okay, here we go. So I was like, I'm going on 3. I was counted 3, shouted, swore, and I just jumped. And literally just grabbed on by my my fingertips, and it was fine. I like pulled myself up and kind of got up to the ledge and collapsed a little bit. And was just like, yeah, that was one of the scariest moments of my life. Even though I wasn't in any danger, I've been in far more sort of scary situations, really. But one of those things where pure panic just took over. But I thought what was such a lovely takeaway from that is, you know, once I got past that point, we get up to the top. And I thought if I'd have, not that quitting was an option, it wasn't, but if I'd have quit at that point and gone back down, I would never have made it to the top. And I just came away thinking, I wonder, you know, where else you could get to in life if you pushed past your comfort zone and did the things you didn't want to do. So that was a great takeaway for me, even though it was a hard lesson.
I would have passed out.
Yeah.
It's the same situation.
Yeah, I was close.
Anything like that. I'm okay with man-made structures, but
Yeah.
when I go walking over cliffs or something, and I don't necessarily know it's cliffs
Yeah.
until I'm there and can see down, my whole body shuts down.
Yeah.
I sweat in places I don't even know I have. And you almost get that tunnel vision, and you're just like, I can't think of anything else apart from impending death, and that's it. I go. But so, how did you translate that experience into business, and how do you learn to let go?
Yeah, and a good question. So I think like a lot of business owners, I was trying to do too many things myself. You know, I wasn't fully trusting the team that I'd built, and I was trying to do too many things. I was trying to be like the lead technician. I was being the accounts, the marketing, everything. And I quite quickly realized that I was the bottleneck in the business. So I was like, if I'm trying to do everything, you know, I'm being a generalist rather than a specialist. I was like, I need to let go of that control, actually hand over that control to people who are better than me. And then I need to get out of their way and leave them to it and not try and interfere. And that doesn't mean you ignore them and just let them do anything, but it means you tell them what you expect, you monitor it to make sure they're doing everything right, but you trust them and you leave them to it. And I think after that, my philosophy really changed with my team and my staff. So rather than saying you start at nothing and you have to build my trust, I say you start at 100% trust when I hire you, otherwise I wouldn't have hired you. And unless you give me a reason not to trust you, you've got my trust. And it was quite hard for me to let go, because when I started the business, it was just me building websites. I was the business. It was me people were buying into. And to completely let go of that was quite a difficult thing, I suppose. But it's the only way you will get growth and get to those new heights is by letting go. So, yeah.
How big's your team now?
We're a team of 10 now.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
How have you found, so I guess learning to let go is one part of that.
Yeah.
The next part of that's probably learning the delegation side of things as well.
Yeah.
Did that come naturally to you?
Oh, not at all. I'm very introverted naturally, and you know, I just started life as a web designer. I never intended to be like a leader or a manager. I find delegation very difficult, to be honest. It doesn't sit comfortably with me, but that was part of that lesson of, you know, leaving your comfort zone. And I've learned, actually, if I'm trying to do everything and I've got people in place and I'm not delegating, they're sitting around with nothing to do while I'm frantically doing all the work. And they're feeling, you know, why aren't I trusted? Why am I here? And actually, no one's happy. So you have to delegate in order to keep everyone happy. Which, yeah, was hard for me to learn, but it's an important thing. Yeah, you have to.
Practically speaking, what were the first things you started to delegate out? Like, what were the things that were absolutely there coming off the list?
I got rid of the stuff that was easiest to delegate and the lowest skilled things. So we get, you know, dozens of support tickets a week. And I'd say 80% of those support tickets is basic things like, I've locked myself out of the website, I've forgotten my password, I've published a blog post, but I'm not seeing it on the front end. Things that, you know, were very, very easy for someone with no skill to quickly learn and do. So rather than try and delegate the actual web design, which had taken me, you know, decades of experience to get to where I got to, I let go of like the technical support. So we got a technical person in to just deal with support tickets. The bookkeeping, very low skilled to just say, here's an expense, someone match that on Zero, and now our accountants do all of that for us and saves me a lot of time. And once you start delegating and letting go, you wonder why you tried to do it all yourself in the first place.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's the story we always come back to, isn't it? Of how we faffed trying to get our first VAT return done. And it took us 6 days and an accountant about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay.
Or the fact that first employee, 3 months in a row, we paid them wrong. Too much, too little, too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like you say, it was so easy to just delegate that out, and the time that it saved us, we always come back to that as being, of the things we've invested in so far, by far the best thing that we've done, because it just takes off so much. Like you say, you shouldn't be thinking about it, and it's taking up so much of your energy that the outputs in other areas of the business just start to suffer.
Yeah, why? Because you're really good at the thing you're good at. Why would you detract from that? Because you're busy doing the accounts and stuff and payroll, when accountants just know it inside out.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something that was hard for me to learn in some ways. I'm really boring. I really like numbers. I like spreadsheets, and I like looking at what's the margin doing? Is it going up? Is it going down? Etc. Etc. And I was seeing everything as a cost, not necessarily an investment.
Yeah.
And we had a guest on, Claire Dalton, a few weeks ago, and that was one of the things that she was talking about from her first business to her second was sometimes you just have to pay specialists because it'll accelerate the growth astronomically compared to you just trying to do it yourself. And I think in the industries that we work in, it is easier than ever now, theoretically, to say okay, I could get AI to build me a bit of a website, or HubSpot technically does a content strategy now. I get the principle, but it's far from the reality. And if you're a business owner with a million things on or ready to do, just because AI might help you build a website, do you still have those 15 to 20 hours that you would need to tweak the homepage, for example?
I think a practical example as well is DIY.
Yeah.
I am not a tradesperson. When I do DIY, I probably do a 40% job.
Yeah.
Miss bits with the paint, or don't fill in the holes properly, not smooth the walls properly. Why not just pay a professional to do that? And in the time that I've spent doing that, I could have earned more money than what it will cost.
Yeah.
It makes sense to employ the experts to do a job.
Yeah, it's bringing flashbacks. I got a pizza oven the other day, which I'm really excited about, but it took me 3 hours to build it, and I'm still angry about it now, 4 days later. All right, let's move on to, we're jumping around a little bit, but I think it fits in nicely, and this is, you have a go at me for this one all the time, which is why I've put it in there, which is around going at your own pace. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about that.
Okay, so I remember, I think it was in Switzerland, I was on this trek, and I joined a group. It wasn't people I knew, and it was all lads. And young lads get a bit competitive and stuff. And great bunch of lads. But I'm quite a bit shorter than the other lads, and I was really, really pushing myself to keep up with them. You're trying to prove yourself. You don't want to be seen as the slowest in the group or the weakest or anything. And so I was pushing myself really hard to keep pace with everybody. And it got to the point where I realised I was just really struggling. I couldn't catch my breath because, you're higher, you're in the thin altitude, and I wasn't breathing right. I was getting a headache. I just no idea what was going on around me. I was just pushing and pushing and pushing. And the guide pulled me back. He was like, "Joe, you've got to slow down. You're walking too fast." I was like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. And he was like, no, you're just pushing yourself too hard. He said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you're less fit or you're less strong. You just got shorter legs than the other guys. He said, you got to find a pace that you can literally walk at all day. He said, because we are walking all day. He said, there's not an hour's walk. We've got 12 hours of this. So he said, if you're pushing yourself, he said, there's no way you're making it to the end. So I dropped my pace right down. So I was just going, you find kind of a natural rhythm that you walk at. And suddenly it was just lovely. Your heart rate comes down, your breathing comes back to normal, the headache goes, you start noticing all the lovely things around you and the amazing sights that you're seeing. And actually, in reality, you get there maybe 10 minutes after everyone else. Like, that's the difference between killing yourself and going at your own pace. It's like 10 minutes. And, you know, you get there, no one's judging you or mocking you. Everyone's just like happy to see you. And yeah, that kind of just taught me, I was like, actually, I don't need to go at anyone else's pace. I just got to find the pace that's right for me and make that work for you. And you just have such a better journey for it. And that taught me a lot in business as well, because, you know, you quite often compare yourself to other business owners. Like, you hear stories of people who's started a business and within a year they've got 50 staff, or they're doing £500,000 turnover, or, you know, things like that. And you're thinking, well, I've been going 10 years, I don't have 50 staff. You know, I didn't hit that kind of turnover in year 2. Like, maybe I'm a terrible business owner. But then I thought, you just don't know their story. You don't know if they started that business and took a ton of clients with them from their old job. They might have already been very well known in the industry. Maybe they're killing themselves working day and night to build their business, or I'm, you know, value my own time, family time. And I thought, you know, just cut your own pace. Stop comparing yourself with everybody else. That's their journey and you're on your journey, and there's no right or wrong. You just do what's right for you.
Amen. I want that clipped up. So every time you compare yourself to someone else in the industry, I can send that to you, because that is a perfect response. So it's amazing. I think, yeah, it's that focus on yourself, isn't it? Yeah. And it's just doing that. And also, on the flip side, Harry, because he's a bit of a workaholic, I'll be nice about it, he almost expects other people to work as hard as he does sometimes, and that's not always the way. That's not how you're going to get people. Do you find it difficult when you're putting the hours in and your team to you might not seem to be putting the same amount of effort in? How do you release yourself from those thoughts?
We don't really struggle with that. So we've got a really good team, and we've actually switched to a 4-day work week, where it's same pay, but you just work Monday to Thursday. So you get a 3-day weekend. And I find the team will naturally pace themselves quite, you know, a pretty good pace to get everything done by Thursday, so they can enjoy that 3-day weekend. And then I don't need to hold them accountable, because the weekend's holding them accountable, and they love it. They're happy with it. So, yeah, but I think if you've got good people who love what they do, they'll go at a good pace anyway.
So on the 4-day working week thing, so how many meetings do you reckon we sat in? Hours
days,
and hours.
days.
Yeah, probably
3 days worth of time just talking about a 4-day week.
Like if it was something that we were going to go into, I think I had a question on this actually, which was like 4-day work week. Like, totally get it for the staff. Do you do a 4-day work week, or do you find yourself going into that 5th day, 6th day?
I try to do it. Okay. I'm trying to be really strict with it, and it is quite difficult because it's your baby, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, but we still have our support desk open 7 days a week, so the team still man that. So if there is a problem, the support guys will jump on it. And I'm trying to be really strict in not doing it. But it also means if there are a few urgent business tasks that need doing, I can take an hour on a Friday and it's fine. And then that doesn't mean, you know, it means that I'm not dipping into my weekend to do it. So I get the whole weekend back. So, yeah, I'm trying.
Moving on to another lesson. Can you explain the power of how and give us an example of it?
Yeah, okay. So I think how is like one of the most powerful words in the dictionary when it comes to solving problems. And again, it uses completely different parts of your brain when you say, how am I going to do this? So if you're in panic mode and you're like, I can't do this, we've lost that client, we've lost money, you know, this path's collapsed on the you're just in that panic mode, you're not thinking clearly. Whereas when you rephrase all those panic statements as how questions, so how can we, you know, make up the clients we've lost? How can we get our turnover up? How can we get across this path, this obstruction? Your brain starts using all its other, you know, parts. It's decision-making part, it's memory recall part, it's logic part, instead of this little panic part, to come up with solutions. And it's almost like, you know, if you've got a problem and you say, oh my God, I've got this problem, I don't know what to do. And you talk to a friend and you say to a friend, how am I going to get out of this problem? And because your friend's not the one with the problem, they're like, oh, well, why don't you try this? And why don't you try that? And it's about using that same kind of logic on yourself. So instead of being in this panic state, you're just saying, well, okay, we've lost some clients, or we've got this major problem in the business. Not what are we going to do? How are we going to get past this? You're saying, how can I get the finances back up? How can I cut some costs? How can I fix this problem? And then I'll force myself to write 10 solutions. And I'll say, doesn't matter if they're great or awful, just write 10. I'm just going to write 10 solutions, how I'm going to solve this problem. And then I'll say, even if they're all rubbish, I'll pick the worst of a bad bunch and we'll go with that. And then you've got something rather than nothing but panic. So, yeah, great word.
So another lesson that you talk about is around, and this is an interesting one. So you talk about like being able to walk away. And like, I think if you read a lot of business books or if you listen to a lot of advice, like the ability to walk away from something is spoken about all the time. And it's like it sounds great in principle. Like it talks to us like how hard is it to really, in the book you talk about, I think is walking away from a 10K a month deal after a couple of weeks. Like,
yeah.
Let's get really into the realities of it. Like how difficult is it to walk away?
It definitely depends where you are in the business. So early days of the business, it was impossible. You know, when you're paying yourself 700 quid a month, you're living off beans on toast, someone's coming to you with a project and you know they're going to be a terrible client, but you know, they're offering you $5,000 and you're like, I'm living off beans on toast and there's $5,000 on the plate, you're going to take the $5,000. So it's very, very hard. And, you know, we're obviously very fortunate now that we're in a position where we can turn away clients if we don't like the look of them. But I think it's something you have to train yourself to do. It's just that kind of be brave and walk away from a bad thing, even though it looks good. Just don't let temptation override logic. So the deal I talk about in the book, this guy, it was a deal that would have been worth $10,000 a month, which to us as a small business was a good deal. And I should have been really excited by this deal, but there were just too many little alarm bells going off in my head. So he was way too quick to sign up. There was no kind of thorough review. He was just like, yeah, sounds perfect. Send the contract. I'll sign that across today. Like very eager. He was a new startup, didn't seem to have funding behind him. And I'm thinking, where's the guy getting this kind of money? It just didn't feel right. You know, I was like, you don't win a $10,000 a month contract that easily. It just felt wrong. So I said, okay, we'll accept it. We'll sign the contract. But I said the first hint of something being off and we're dropping him. I said, I don't care, you know, how good that $10,000 a month looks. And, you know, you're thinking about, I can get all new equipment for the team, give myself a pay rise, give the team a pay rise. I said, no, don't be distracted by those things. I said, it doesn't matter. If it looks bad, we're turning it away. And I think within 3 days of signing the contract, before it even paid us a penny, he starts moving the goalposts. So things that we said would take him 3 weeks, or that would take us 3 weeks, he said, I want this, done by Monday. Things that we'd never agreed on, he started saying, we need this, and that should be part of the deal. And I said, no, I'm sorry, deal's off. I don't want to work with you. You haven't paid me anything yet, so there's no deal. You find somewhere else. And this guy went crazy. He left us this massive long rant on Trustpilot, 1-star review, avoid this company. And I thought, can you imagine how this guy would have been if we'd taken his money? That was before he paid us a penny. He was treating us like that. And I was just I'm so glad we walked away from it. And it's always hard in the moment, but your future self will thank you for it, because they just suck all of your time and all of your energy. I think running a business is hard enough as it is without the added stress of a bad client. So even though the money looks good, you'll find that money somewhere else with a better client. So just drop them.
More lessons? Should we
Yeah,
keep
I
going
think
with
so.
the
I
lessons?
think we
Okay.
should.
Okay, I like this one. Keeping to the path. And I suppose that comes down to power of focus. It's something that over the 10 months we've not struggled with as such, but we've almost been in the phase of let's try this, let's try that and see what works, and then we'll focus in on that area. For you, power of focus and knowing what you want to focus on, how important is that?
I think we wouldn't be here today if we hadn't been focused. It's so easy for entrepreneurs and business owners to get distracted because they're ideas people, they're creative people. That's why they're an entrepreneur. And in the early days of setting up my business, this happened a lot where I'd get distracted by something that sounded amazing. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. You know, there's going to be loads of money in this, or we're going to do this thing. And I'd be setting up side hustles and other businesses and, you know, new paths. And actually all I was doing is neglecting the business that was actually in place and doing well, making money. So, you know, chasing off after these shiny objects, which was just a waste of time and focus and energy. Which is something I'm now much stricter at doing, is say I don't care. Well, if I haven't what I think is a good idea, I put it in a jar called Joe's Idea Jar that sits on my desk. And I say, right, I'm going to put a note in my calendar to review it in a month. And if in a month it's still a good idea, I still love it, then I say, okay, we'll explore it. But I'd say probably 8 out of 10 times in a month's time, I kind of think actually it wasn't such a good idea. I just got excited. And you know, I compare that a lot to mountaineering because you start off at your base, you have a fixed destination in mind, you've got a limited time window to reach that destination, you've got limited supplies, food, water, and you know, if you went wandering off the path every time you say, oh, I wonder where that path goes, let's see what's down there, you'd probably die because, you know, you'd get lost or you don't know what dangers are on that path. You wouldn't get back to your cabin by nightfall, and it'd just be a disaster. You know, you have to go straight to the point and ignore all the other paths that present themselves. And I thought, yeah, that's a really important lesson to get into your destination, is maintaining that focus.
You said earlier on that you like never necessarily set out to be a leader of, you know, a team and of people. That wasn't necessarily the driver in the early days. Obviously, you're now here, company 10 people. That is what you do now, right? I would imagine most of your time is probably spent on people rather than on product, whatever it may be, services. This is probably my favorite story from the book. So, you were tracking to Everest Base Camp, and the leader of the group had a bit of a framework of 3 questions that they were asking you, and that's something that you've taken into your business. So tell us the 3 questions and tell us how that's helped you.
Okay, so I never saw myself as a leader, because when I think of a leader, I think of a boss that has to tell people off and give people an ass kicking and things like that, which I'm just so uncomfortable with. And this guy, Pasang, I just loved his leadership style. So at the end of each day, he'd kind of say, right, what went well today? What didn't go so well? And what can we do better tomorrow? And people would say things like, oh, you know, I had a terrible nosebleed from all the dust that was kicking around. And he'd say, okay, that was a good point. So guys, tomorrow, if you've got like a scarf or something, just wrap it around your face and stop the dust getting in. So it's quite a good way of the group kind of opening up and sharing. And then each night he'd come and see all of us in turn, one-on-one. And he'd say, tell me one thing that's going really well. Tell me one thing that's not going so well. And then I'll do the same. I'll tell you what I think. And, you know, I'd say something like, yeah, I think it's going well. I think my fitness is good. I'm not struggling with the altitude. It's all okay. And he'd say, and what's not going so well? And I'd say, you know, actually, I am struggling with my knee a bit, the one where I tore the ligament and the cartilage in a taekwondo accident years ago. And I say, it is hurting, but it's fine. I'm managing it. And he was like, oh, you know, why didn't you say anything? I was like, I don't know. I guess I didn't want to look weak, or I was worried you were going to throw me off the trek or something. He was like, no, don't be silly. He said, but it's good you've told me. And he'd give me a bit of advice, like make sure you take ibuprofen before you start trekking to bring the swelling down and stuff. Slow the pace on the downhill, make sure you're using your poles, like practical things like that. But because he'd do that each night, you'd come to kind of expect it. So it wasn't awkward to have that conversation. You'd almost be thinking about it in advance. You said, yeah, it's all good today, but here's one thing that wasn't so good today. And that could be anything, like things that you wouldn't necessarily open up if you didn't know that was coming. So actually, my morale was a bit low. I was a bit homesick today. I didn't sleep well. Whatever you wanted to share. And just knowing that you had that kind of safe space to share it without worrying you were going to get told off or judged or kicked out was really, really good. So I do that with the team now, where we'll have like a quarterly, I don't like the word review because it's not a performance review, but it's like a quarterly chat where they know what to expect. They know what it's come in. They know I'm not looking at their performance, but I'm just saying, tell me what do you think's going well. Tell me what you think's not going so well. And you let them open up. And that way you're not having to say to them, this is not going well. You need to pick this up. They're coming to you with it. So you're like, great, thanks for sharing. Now we'll look at how we can improve it. And I just think it's a lovely way of leadership without having to be kind of authoritative. So yeah, I thought that worked great.
What are the questions again? Give me those two.
So he said, give me one thing that you think is going really well. Give me one thing that you think is not going so well, and then I'll do the same. So he'd say, like, yeah, I think you're right. I think your strength is good, but also I noticed you were going too quick back there. You weren't pacing yourself, or you get out of breath. You're not breathing properly. So giving that bits of feedback like that.
Okay, that's good. Let's do it now. Come on, the 12:25.
What's that?
We'll do the two questions. Go on.
Oh, you start?
No, I'm asking. You go
okay,
first.
Right. Okay, so I think the fact that we're still here and we're growing, things like this podcast are growing, our audience is growing, decent guests are coming on board. I think that's
some of them are right.
But I think it's generally positive, our growth journey. We are growing. We're not in that survival mode, and I think there's a lot to be excited for in the future. Things that could probably have gone a bit better. I don't know. I think the one that you usually have a go at me about is admin. So I'll probably pick that and try and get a bit better with admin, like HubSpot or emails or putting things in the diary.
Okay.
How about you?
Interesting. I would agree. I'd say for the positive, I would agree in terms of looking at the like what's not going so well. What could we do differently? I think that's an interesting question. I would go with we give us like this will be specifically for this podcast actually.
Yeah, okay.
We're really bad at adding qualifiers to questions. So like with a guest, we'll ask a question and then like while you might be thinking about the answer, we'll like try and qualify the question, which then leads a guest into going down that route that we've qualified it for.
Yeah.
I think we're terrible. Like we could get far better at that.
So how could you improve?
I think we need to get more comfortable with silence on the podcast, especially that we don't like if it goes quiet between us and the guest, we kind of just like panic and then say the first question that comes into our heads. I think becoming more comfortable with silence.
Yeah, it's like the Diary of a CEO podcast, and some people will have bad things to say, but at times there are such long pauses that I'm actually getting my phone out to check if the podcast is still on. So I'm not saying we have to do that much, but we're filling the air because we're almost a bit uncomfortable.
One of our goals is to get someone to cry on the podcast. So,
okay.
So if you feel like go for it, just let it out.
My goal is to get you crying on the podcast.
Okay, all right, I reckon that could work. Quick fire questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
You go for the first one.
Okay, so what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
I think something my coach said to me once, it really stuck with me, is he said the shit hits the fan for everybody, is how you deal with it that makes the difference. So he said, if you have, say, a level 4 out of 10 problem, but as a business owner, you're only, say, 1 out of 10, that 4 is a massive problem. So if you're a 10 out of 10 business owner, that 4 out of 10 problem is nothing. So he said, you're always going to have problems. You're always going to have the shit and the issues and everything. It's the same for everyone. It's just how you deal with it that's different.
This was vaguely connected to lesson 17 in the book in terms of investing in the right tools.
Yeah.
Either personally or professionally. What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made?
Good question. In business or in the mountains?
Either way.
In the mountains, it's definitely your boots. Definitely. I've walked with cheap boots, and they're not waterproof like they say they are. Your feet get sore, you get the blisters. It's just terrible. So a good pair of boots is critical. In business, it's got to be the people. And I've learned the hard way. You get what you pay for. And if you hire cheap people, you get rubbish. And if you can't afford to hire good people, just don't hire anyone. Because the damage they do to your brand, the amount of time they cost you, the amount of headaches you have in then getting rid of them from your business. So just, what is it I say? Hire slow, fire fast. So yeah, just invest in good people.
Perfect. What's your favourite failure?
My favourite failure? How do you mean?
The biggest lesson you've learnt from something that went wrong, or some sort of failure that's actually driven you on to better things?
That's a good question. Favourite failure? How long have we got?
Go for it.
Probably the Mont Blanc climb. So this was 2 years ago. I went to climb Mont Blanc, and I'd been training really hard. It's an expensive trip. It cost me a lot of money to do it. I'd been training flat out, so I'd got myself in a great shape. And I don't know if you remember from the news, but 2 years ago was when we had that crazy hot summer, and that they literally shut Mont Blanc over the summer because it was so dangerous. So Mont Blanc summit should be about 0 degrees in summer, and it was 10, like plus 10 degrees. So it was way too hot. And for the whole summer, we didn't know if we'd be able to go out and do the climb at the end of summer. And a week before the climb, they phoned us up and they said, no, conditions haven't stabilised, the climb's off. And I was relieved. I was like, good, it sounds crazy. Like, they were literally making people pay like a 12 grand death deposit in case they had to get your body off the mountain or something. And then 10 minutes later, they phone me back and they say, oh, the weather's cooled down a bit, so it's fine, we're back on. I was like, hang on a minute, 10 minutes ago you told me it was unsafe. I don't really feel comfortable doing this. And they said, well, the authorities have said it's fine, so unfortunately there's no refunds because we're saying it's fine, so it's your choice to not do it. And I agonised about it. And my wife said, look, go and do it, but if you get a sense of anything not being right, just promise me you'll walk away. And I said, okay, that's a fair promise. So we went out there. And from the second we got out there, it's like everything that kind of could go wrong went wrong. So the guide turned up. He was extremely disorganized, rude, stressed. A good guide should always check all your kit well in advance. And he got there late. He made everyone just dump their kit on the floor of this hotel lobby. Just quickly looked over everything. Was like, yeah, fine, pack up, let's go. So that was the start. It's obviously a bad start. And then we got up there and the whole place was just so unstable. So there's massive crevasses all over the glacier. The guys said they'd never seen anything like it. We saw massive like rock falls where bits of the whole cliff face were just collapsing from the extreme heat. And you have a few days training and climbing to acclimatization up there. And, this guide wasn't doing things right. He wasn't like roping up properly when we were climbing. He was rushing everybody. He admitted that he'd retired, since got divorced, and had just doing a bit of guiding because he needed the money, but you could tell his heart wasn't in it. And the whole time I just had this real feeling of anxiety. And then the day before we were to start the actual climb of Mont Blanc, we were due to do this training walk, and it was so slippy because the snow was just slush. There was nothing to grip into. I said, I don't feel safe. I'm not doing it. So I went back to the Aguil de Midi. It's like the cable car centre. And actually, when they came back, so the guiding ratio was 2-1. And the guy I'd been roped up with, and our guide, he had actually slipped and tumbled over the edge, and the guide had, managed to dig in with his ice axe and save him. And I thought, God, if I'd have been, roped up to that guy, which I was, who's to say that the guide could have held both of our weights? Like, maybe not. So I said there and then, right, that's it. I'm not going to go for the summit of Mont Blanc. I said, I'll trek up to the Tête Rousse hut, which is like the first hut, and then that's it. And I won't go past that. And it was quite a crushing failure to do that without even trying, because of all the months of training, getting myself crazy fit, all the money I'd put into it, all the equipment I bought for it. And, to walk away without even trying and fail before I'd even started was really hard. But I said, it's not worth risking my life over. So the next day we do the climb to the Tête Rousse hut, and that's fine. And then the first point after the Tête Rousse hut, which you do the next morning, is called the Grand Couloir, which is basically this little valley you have to run across because it spits rocks day and night. Something like over 100 climbers have died on that exact point in like a decade or something. Like, the guides call it the Death Couloir because it's it's so dangerous. And then that night there was this massive storm that hit, which was amazing because you're above the storm and you see the storm kind of below you, which is incredible. And I've always learned, don't trek after a storm because it just loosens everything up and makes for unsafe conditions. And the guide said, based on the weather, there was a 50-50 chance of whether they'd even be able to make a summit attempt. And I was like, no way. There's no way I'm risking my life crossing the Grand Couloir for only a 50% shot. And the other guys in the group were like, yeah, we're going to go for it. We'll give it a go. And got up the next morning. They went off. I stayed in the hut. And it was quite gutting to see that because they're going off all excited and there's me just sitting there, and I felt crap because I was like, I haven't even tried it. I was like, it seems sunny, it seems fine, they've all gone for it. And you start thinking, like, doubting yourself. I was like, what if they're all up on the summit and I'm here on my own just sitting around the cabin like a pussy because I didn't even dare to attempt it. And then I thought, no, this, I'll do it another time. Anyway, I trekked back down. And then I didn't hear what happened until I was back in the UK because I managed to get an earlier flight home. So when I got back from the UK, I heard from the other group what happened, and they said they got up to the next hut, the Guta hut. Then this massive storm hit. They were trapped in the hut for like 3 days, 2 or 3 days, I think, because they couldn't leave. 2 guys had gone for it. One guy and the guide. The wind was so strong that the guy had been blown off the ridge on the summit attempt. The guide had gone over the other side, saved his life because they were roped up together. So he'd saved him, but in doing so, he'd sliced his leg open on his crampons. They had to limp back to the hut. And you can imagine that in a storm with your leg slashed. That's limp back supporting each other. There's no helicopter that can get up there to get them off. So they're just stuck up there, hoping this guy doesn't bleed out and get infected or whatever, waiting for the storm to clear. I think finally on like the 3rd morning, they had a 2-hour window where they had to scale down this cliff face that was covered in snow and ice from the storm. While they had that window to get off. And they said, Joe, we wish we'd done what you did. They said it was the most horrific experience of their lives. That, they said it was so dangerous climbing down. It was horrible for them seeing the guy injured and they couldn't do anything about it. And so that was a spectacular failure. But, that just taught me, just like with the dodgy 10 grand deal, if it doesn't feel right, just walk away. And sometimes it's okay to fail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's one more to finish, lighten the mood a little bit, and then we'll wrap. What are you excited about at the moment?
What am I excited about? I'm really excited about the future of Red Giraffe, the business, where we're going. We've got a great team now. We've got amazing growth plans, and we've got some really cool ideas that we're bringing in. Personally, just, I don't know, we've got a lot of fun stuff. So I got married last year, and this is the first year that my wife is now part-time, which is the business has let us do. So we can just enjoy a lot of quality time as a couple now. So I think no big mad adventures coming up. Just nice time as a couple.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's it. We're done.
Awesome.
Thank
Yeah.
you.